Hi, I'm Antonio the artist, and I am a full-time creative missionary, and I also disciple those who are pursuing creativity and how to make God known in that. I use arts, painting, so I do live art, worship art, prophetic art, all those fun things. I also have a business where I do commissioned work, and I do art demos, art classes, all that fun stuff. But I also do comedy, acting. I love flag dancing. I'm the crazy guy in church. But and I'm an evangelist at heart, so I love people and I love serving the community practically as well. Stick.
Yeah, you look good.
Bye.
Yeah, it's true. I'm back. So tell me how, in your own words, tell me how you received your creative calling, your
Okay.
calling to paint. We know you as a painter. I know you do many things, but tell me how you received the calling to paint and how you feel it came about.
Well, I mean, I've been creative all my life. Artistic, rather. I've always been artistic. But when I got saved at 19, just a couple weeks in, I had given up everything at this point. I did everything, gave up, the ability to make art and music, TV, dance, all of my passions. I just kind of resurrendered them. I had no expectation of picking them back up. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to be a good Christian, go to church, read my Bible, and get to know Jesus, share about Jesus wherever I go. And I just want to live a life dedicated to the Lord. But in the same breath, as I made that decision to let go, it was a couple days later, a couple weeks, I can't remember, but it was shortly after that I felt the Lord say, pick up your brush and paint. And I thought to myself, like, but isn't it easier if I would just preach or just share about you or just talk to people about what I've learned or whatever? And he says, I told you, pick up your brush and paint. And so this voice, it wasn't like a voice in my ear, it wasn't audible, but it was a thought in my heart or a revelation that I was receiving because I felt like I was getting revelations so quickly. Like it was like new revelations were coming to my heart. And this was a new one of pick up your brush and paint. And then alongside that revelation came, because this will become your key into the nations. This will become something that will take you into many countries. And I was just in awe of that. And so, okay, so I picked up my art. I didn't pick up dance. I didn't pick up TV. I didn't pick up music. Those things were still dead until its due time. But art, I did pick up, and I picked up my brush, and that day I did portraits, which were always my weakest thing. And I had these new ideas in my head, and I was like, God, you have to give me the skill to do what you're talking about, because now I'm getting these visions and these dreams and these ideas, and I need the skill to do these things. And immediately, like, there was skill, and I knew that that was a confirmation that that I was called to create, and him validating his voice and just repeating himself, pick up your brush and paint, and this will become your key into the nations. And it was shortly after that I met people in creative evangelistic ministries that then took me in to teach me how to use my gift.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was all in the same breath.
Yeah.
Coming to Jesus, starting to paint, it all within the same couple weeks, you said.
Within the first couple weeks, it just all came together. A calling to follow him and a calling to create and how to do it, because it was just shortly after that I was I guess exposed to so many creative ministers and creative avenues of reaching out.
Right. So as we were talking earlier, I said that it's kind of like God was renewing your mind on, and I know part of your testimony, how you saw yourself, your own identity, because of what you went through, but also everything that you participated in mentally, your identity, your look,
Yeah.
and your creativity. So he wanted to renew all aspects of that mind, and it all happened in one.
In one breath. Yeah, it was, and it was of course, day by day, because it's a process, but creativity was something that came during the earlier times, because he also began to disciple me through that creativity. So I was learning a lot about myself as I painted and as I had to learn to be creative. I didn't have the ability to create things that were in my heart or my mind, but I had the ability to draw an animal or a still life, a landscape, whatever, somebody else's pieces of art. But
Well, let's go back, because you said something that was interesting, that he was discipling you through your art.
Right.
Explain how that happened. What do you mean by that he was discipling you through your art?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I learned how to trust God. So in my first piece, I remember this was my first piece. I was doing a 3 portraits of eyes, and I just experimented with spirituality mixed with that for the first time. It wasn't a prophetic piece. It was just eyes of my cousins. And I was shocked that I could create these portraits because portraits were my weakest point. So first portrait I did, I prayed beforehand and I created, and I was like, wow, this came out beautiful, and I couldn't believe it. Then the second piece I did, I prayed after I did it. And so I was having trouble, and then I prayed after, and then I finished it in like 5 minutes, and I was like, okay, prayer had a place. And then in the third one, I prayed throughout, and that was the best piece that I did. And so I saw that clearly God was doing something new within me, that I had skill when I would dedicate it to the Lord, but I had the old skill when I was just doing it for myself. And so immediately I was seeing that I needed to learn to pray, to dedicate my craft to the Lord, these things. Then I grew into having to learn to hear God to create. So now I was getting dreams and visions and ideas that I didn't have before, and now I needed to partner that prayer with hearing God. And then I met a ministry where I was doing prophetic art or live art. Let's just start with live art. I was doing live art, and now I needed to learn how to pray to God, to have the non-anxious mindset, or a mind of peace, to be able to create in a short amount of time. Then it was create in a quick amount of time, ask God for wisdom and skill. And so it was just all these things. Then I remember doing my first couple of live pieces were actually really bad. And I learned humility, and I learned that it was God through my art who was going to be the power, right? So it wasn't my skill, it wasn't my craft, it was me being willing to use my craft that released the power of God. Mm-hmm. And so I saw that God wanted to create platforms through me, through my art, through my craft, and through my time. Like, I created a space. It was almost like because I was creating, a moment was created for God to move. Whereas before, those moments didn't exist because I wasn't painting in that moment. And so I just saw that God was then speaking to people. Then it was helping disciple me because I was remembering what God was saying, because I was painting what God was saying. So just back to back to back, I grew tremendously in a matter of a year, because I was working on a project called 365, and we did 1 painting a day for a year. And I was forced to hear God, to pray, to that when I backslid, to create even then, that even my ugly art was a way to remind me of who I was. So all these things, whether it was creative opportunity, creating platforms for God, hearing from God, prophetic art, worship art, all of this helped me grow as a person.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a full package. It was like a boot camp in Jesus. That's so cool.
I always feel like artists will sacrifice so much for their creativity because it's tied so personal to us. Mm-hmm. I feel like God can drag us a long way by our gifts and talents that we wouldn't do
like
otherwise.
A cookie?
Yeah. If you want a cookie,
if you want a cookie,
right.
You got to do this
because
interview.
we're willing to make sacrifices that we're not with other things. But
sure.
For the sake of our creativity, it's so ingrained, we'll do it. So I think you were so engaged with him because you were thinking, you had the process, you were doing what you loved, and I think that anytime you give him focus,
yes.
and you engage with him through whatever it is, he's going to use that time to interact with you.
Yes.
And teach you and bring you revelation.
And you brought up something too when you said the focus. So I was forced to spend time with God to create a piece of art for this project that we were doing with the ministry.
Yeah.
So it forced me to develop a devotional life in that year. And I grew so much because I had to learn Bible. I had to understand what I was reading. I had to learn prayer and understand what I was praying. And so it was just like, and then I had to learn community through that. I was forced into community with those 10 artists. And it was so funny because at the end of the project, we were actually complimented at the fact that we were 10 artists who got along and didn't kill each other by the end of the year. Yeah. And so it was great to build community because I'm still in community with those very same people. And so to be in community, strong knit, to be tied into something where I'm accountable, to be accountable to hearing God, to create quality art, or art that speaks, or art that has worth or value in the kingdom. All these things. Even in the process of our trip, we challenged each other to take our pieces of art out into the street and see what it would do with unbelievers. And so to see the impact that it had of taking a piece that maybe I did in 1 minute, but I took it to somebody, had a conversation with them, and then it impacted their lives so much, like that it pulls people out of depression, or out of it encouraged them in their time when they were planning on divorcing their wife. Or it was just incredible to see that something so simple had so much power. But it wasn't the art. It was the fact that God was working through our craft.
Yeah.
And so it was amazing.
Yeah, that is awesome. So tell me this then. We know you mostly as a painter.
Right.
But you don't feel called. You wouldn't say your calling is painting, right?
Mm-mm.
So explain that to me. How do you categorize the call of God? And we would say, oh, Antonio's called to be a painter. You can see it by what he does. How would you answer that or differentiate that?
How would I differentiate that? I think it's clear that I was called to just get to know Jesus. Then he identified how to do that. And in every season of our lives, it shifts and change. And that's why now I have like 1,000 talents, it feels like. But it started with a moment of obedience. And so I needed to learn to be obedient. How do I explain this? So the call was to get to know Jesus, to be with Jesus, to be with community, to just sit before him and learn from him. What that looked like in me, because I was created for it, was everything from arts to comedy to dance to all of that, acting. Like it was just like all of that creativity just helped me go after Jesus first. Then I saw that in the process of going after Jesus, you're overflowing in life, and all you can do is give to others. So then there's that call that you read about in the Bible of being ministers of reconciliation, and that becomes your heart. You get a heart for people in the process because you find out that God has such a heart for you. And not only that, I mean, being called to creativity or to be creative or created to be like that, you find that God is so personable, so unique, that you want to tell people about that, because we're so used to just church. I'm just church. I go to church. I sit down. I do worship. Some people preach. Some people do worship, sing worship. But when you find that God is interested in your creativity, that means he's interested in other people's creativity. And when you see that you're learning by being creative, then that means others can learn by being creative. So sharing that message that you don't always hear became a huge part of my life. Is sharing with people, you were created as well to be unique in the way that you express not only what you're learning, but to express to others about the good news and the gospel.
Yeah, amen.